What is going on, guys? Jack here, and welcome to episode 16 of the Charge to the Top, here with Hereford FC, and today I have for you guys an end of season live com for the season 2 kind of season of this save. I don't know where I was going there, but yes, we are here. We're doing a review. We're going to have a look at our season, our squad, how we got on, the highs, the lows, where things kind of came to a head. I don't know if these are going to be something I do frequently as end of season episodes, but of course with the title wrapped up, last episode was the cup final, which I recommend you go and check out if you didn't. It was of course over 2 legs, and well, eagle-eyed viewers may notice it does say here Southern League Cup winner. Yes, we did run away with that trophy, which was a fantastic one, and you can see here in summary we were expected to make much of the Southern Premier title running, and we lived up to our pre-season billing, finishing top of the pile. And yeah, I feel like that's where we need to start, really, is the fact that we achieved what was expected of us reasonably comfortably in the end. We finished 9 points ahead of Weymouth, who finished 6 points ahead of Salisbury. But as you can see here, Salisbury, of course, the team who got promoted with us last year, and the year before that, before I was in charge, they have gone up again. So they are following in our footsteps, kind of becoming a competitive rival of sorts, I guess you could say. And, well, our goal difference was by far and away the best in the league. To be fair to Salisbury, theirs was the second best by quite some margin, really, to the teams trailing. So it's kind of nice to go up with them. We will have a look through some of the player stats in just a second, but obviously we want to look at the other bits and pieces here. You can see the match of the season was a 3-1 win against Basingstoke. That was a massive game at the time. It feels like a long time ago, that kind of start of November tie. Of course, the missed penalty looked like it could have been a turning point, but we cracked on well, and Ote got a goal. Jay Smith scored an absolute banger, which I feel like we have to re-watch because it was just that good in this game. It was... for me, goal of the season. We'll see what goal of the season was in the eyes of the fans, but for me, this was the goal that, I don't know, I will remember from this season. It was against Basingstoke, our big rivals. We scored early, they replied immediately. There was pressure on our shoulders. Ote got 1 goal, but, well, at 2-1, it wasn't comfortable. Harris picked up the ball there, little 1-2 with Stevenson, picks it up, bang, hits it with so much power. Keeper had absolutely no chance, and what a win that was. Dan Townsend, despite missing a penalty, got man of the match in that game. You can see the moment to forget, a game against Salisbury, which actually happened, I believe, since the last episode. You can see here, obviously, we did the cup final matches. You can see the last 4 games of the year, the ones that you missed. We drew against Hayes and Yeading, we lost against Poole, we lost against Salisbury, we did win against St Neots, but... yeah, that result against Salisbury was a little bit disappointing, and, well, as you can see, was the moment to forget for the season, really. In terms of our past league positions, you can see we had a little bit of a slow start, perhaps, but we really cracked on, and then we held on to first for the majority of the season. In terms of the board confidence off the back of this season, you can see they're very happy with our overall leadership of the team. They're obviously fantastically happy of how well we did in the league. They feel like the Jake Sinclair departure was a bit of a bad one, of course. A player who I did look to re-sign, but you can see here, he has ended up going to Accrington Stanley, where he has made just a few appearances in League 2. I'd love to bring him back one day. Whether or not we can do it this coming year, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But all in all, the board are very happy, obviously. Board stature they're happy with, matches they're happy with. And the squad harmony's also been a really nice positive. Anyway, end of season scouting report. You can see here, obviously, I'm going to talk a little bit about our squad building going forward, but more on that shortly. In terms of players injured, you can kind of see here players who are out for the longest period of time. And one thing that may stand out for you is, with the exception of Keenan Bennett, a lot of our first team players didn't have too bad an injuries. It is worth perhaps noting that James Gregory broke his leg, who was an okay youngster, not someone who was ever really in the limelight, but certainly a player who you'd rather not have injured out for as long as we did. I feel like Keenan Bennett was the big miss for us. A player who is obviously fantastically talented. A player who, when I scouted him at the start of the season, was tipped to have kind of League 1 to Championship potential. You can see right now he has the potential to be a Sky Bet League 2 player. Whether or not that will rise back to the levels that my scouts previously told me his potential lied at remains to be seen. But obviously the injury this year has held him back just a little bit. But all in all, we have had a few mini crises, I guess, when it comes to injuries. But in truth, we have been fairly lucky. You can see here a lot of players barely missing any football at all. In terms of the training summary, players to really impress this year, you can see Magno, a player who didn't actually play that much, the Filipino player, a player with quite some potential, released by Derby County. His inconsistency, one of his big weaknesses, but technically a very good player, a player who I'd very much like to keep in the foray, I guess, of the first team. Another player who's really developed well this year, Danny Smith. I feel like this guy could be a very, very special player for us. Whether or not he can be an incredible player going forward, we don't really know yet, but you can see here he's tipped as one of our best midfielders. He's only 17 years old, could improve a lot in the future, consistent, technical, well suited obviously to the division we're in, despite the fact he didn't actually play that many games for us this year. I love the fact he has 13 leadership as well, and to be honest, for a player at this level, he looks very, very good. Fairly professional too. Of course, signed from Haverhill Borough last year, kind of in May time. Anyway, the last player who's had a good year, Oliver Moss, who, yeah, I mean, he's done okay. He's not had many injuries. Can he be a great player for us? Hopefully. Of course, he is one player who I picked up from Maidenhead off the back of this year's Regen Day. I think he could be a good player. His mental's not great. Could do with tutoring, but keep an eye on him. He could be a useful little player for us. So anyway, that's that. In terms of the overall best 11, you can see here how it lies at the moment. Joel Driscoll in goal. We then have Blackshaw, Johnson, Lewis Lacey and Smith along the back. Of course, Lacey, I think I mentioned this, but he is no longer kind of at the club at the moment. He's out on loan, a player who I think will probably leave permanently at the end of the year. Going into the midfield, you've got players like Wright, Purdy, Dan Townsend, Jaden Hall, Ote and Hansbury, the two players up top. I know it's Hanbury, and I said Hansbury in episode 1, and it's just in my head as Hansbury, so I apologise, Sean, if you ever watch this video, because I'm not going to get that right. The other player, of course, Ote, who had the best performance this season, my player of the year by far. 31 goals, 10 assists, in just 33 matches. A fantastic return for him. You can see in terms of the kind of events, Ote won the Fans Player of the Year. Anthony Wright followed in a close, well, actually not a close second. He was some way off the pace. And Hanbury also up there. Young Player of the Year was Ote. Signing of the season was Ote. Jay Harris actually got goal of the season, but it wasn't the goal against Basingstoke. It was this goal against Leamington, which I'm now trying to remember. And I really don't know if I can. So we'll take a look at it. It was by Harris. He scored a few bangers. I think this goes in the top left corner. Yes, it does. Yeah. He scored a few bangers this year, Jay Harris. That was a right... I don't want to use the word thunderbastard, but I'm afraid I'm using it. So I hope you had your headphones in, but it was that good. Not bad for a guy with 11 long shots and 9 technique. That was it, really. He scored a few good goals this season, it's fair to say. So anyway, he got goal of the season with that screamer. We already talked about our season review, but let's have a look at the league and the player stats, because I do feel like we did surprisingly well in some of these areas. If we look at the player overview here, you can see Ote got top goal scorer, who we've already talked about. Anthony Wright, who came runner-up in the Fans Player of the Year, but was some way off the pace, got the most assists this season, 23 for him, and 9 goals. He did a lot, did Anthony Wright, out on the left-hand side. Hanbury actually had the most key passes in the league with 50. Down Townsend as well with 47. You know, quite a few players and quite an interesting range of players here. Of course, Hanbury had a very good year. 20 goals for him in 30 appearances, of which were 8 were on off the bench. If it wasn't for Ote's fantastic season, I feel like this guy would be getting a lot more praise than he currently is. Dan Townsend as well, right up there. Of course, a player who we signed right at the start of our time at the club. He had a fantastic year last year, and I didn't feel like he was going to be able to maintain the level of performance going into this year. But I have to hold my hands up and apologise, because this year, yes, it's not quite perhaps been to the exact same standard, but he's chipped in with some goals. He's got plenty of assists for us, and all in all, he's been a very, very useful player for us. Anyway, you can see here, in terms of player of the matches, we don't unfortunately feature in the list immediately, but you can see Ote and Anthony Wright tied for 4th. Unfortunately, I guess, due to the fact they're both in the same team, they kind of steal each other's man of the matches. And when Hanbury also has 5, you can kind of see why there's a problem with not one of our players really standing out. I talked about Jay Harris's fantastic goal-scoring potential. The kind of darker side of his game, unfortunately, has been his discipline. 13 yellow cards and 2 red cards in 30 appearances. That's a little bit higher than you'd like, isn't it, if we're being honest? It's not ideal, in truth. Anyway, you can see here, if we just look at some more of the detailed stats, we've kind of featured in a few other areas, I do believe. If we look at team goals, you can see, obviously, Dan Townsend and George Johnson played most minutes, I think, this year for us. We can probably find the amount of minutes they've been on the pitch, but 2 very good players for us. Ote actually got the best goals per minute ratio. He's one of 2 players who actually had more than a goal a game on average. He got a goal every 86 minutes, which is a pretty impressive little return by him. In terms of pass completion, I don't know if we're going to be up here in truth. No, we're not. Nowhere near the top of the list. We don't play very safe football. We play the low percentage passes and try and tear open teams that way. So that's perhaps a little bit disappointing. I talked about Jay Harris's red cards with 2 being a lot. Matty Taylor, special kind of shout out to you, my friend. You've got 5 red cards in 1 season. You've played 25 matches. You've been sent off in a 5th of them. That is an impressive record, to say the least. It says a distance cover, perhaps a surprising addition. Dan Townsend right up there, a player you wouldn't really associate with being kind of a very active runner. He's not someone who is particularly mobile. His acceleration pace are okay. His stamina isn't really standout. But he does cover a lot of ground. I feel like that 15 work rate really works for him. And he's right up there. Might be a little bit surprising that he's higher than some of our wingers in the team. But of course, worth noting that in the wide positions particularly, we have seen a fair amount of kind of rotation. But anyway, those are kind of a few of the stats there. I feel like if we just look at our team as a whole here, you can kind of get a feel for how we've got on. If we look at the average ratings, Ote on a 7.7 average rating in all competitions is crazy. Anthony Wright out on the left, of course, has done well. Hanbury's done well. Keenan Bennett's real shame about his injury, which kind of ended his season. Hopefully he can come back fighting next year out on the right-hand side. He played pretty well for us. And Lewis Blackshaw, surprise package for me, a player we signed from Manchester City. I didn't exactly have high aspirations for him. I thought he'd be a good player this year. May need to replace him going forward, but I thought he could do a job for us in the Southern Premier. He's done very well this year, and it's going to make it difficult for me, I feel like, to replace him. Perhaps worth noting here that Anthony Scully picked up an injury right at the end of the season. It's a really bad injury as well. He's got a damaged Achilles tendon. Going to be out to 4 to 5 months. Probably going to miss the start of next season, which is a real shame for the 19-year-old because I really like this guy. Great right midfielder, been good backup for us. He's played a fair few games for us, played well as well when we've called upon him, particularly with, of course, the Keenan Bennett's injury. He kind of made that right midfielder spot his own, and so to have this injury, I don't know, it's pretty disappointing. Anyway, you can see some of the other goal scorers here. We've talked about a lot of these, but David Lynch did chip in with 5 goals. Of course, a player who played fantastically for us last year. But, well, with the amount of new players we did, of course, sign this year, just kind of faded into relative obscurity. You can kind of see here, looking on at our transfers on the ins, we really did add a lot of players to our team this year. Some of them perhaps didn't have quite the impact I was looking at them having. But 20 players in total signed across the season. A few more, of course, if you include players like Stevenson, who we signed right at the end of last year, and the same with Kane Smith and Joel Driscoll. In terms of going forward next year, is there any areas where I drastically want to improve? I wouldn't mind maybe getting in a new centre mid. I'd also quite like to get in maybe a defender or 2 just to add a bit of strength. You can kind of see here the players whose contracts are expiring at the end of the year, so you can perhaps get an idea that the defensive areas are looking a little bit fragile. If I'm going to let a few players go, it might be worth me maybe bringing in replacements for them. I feel like David Lynch is a player who he's asked for first team football. He's a little bit unhappy about it. You can see here he is expecting me to sell him. I feel like we might need to get a replacement striker in for him, someone who can do a job for us, maybe a target man. But kind of looking across the team as a whole, defensively, I feel like the defensive positions are where we will be strengthening for the most part. But I can't see us signing probably more than 10 players next year. In terms of the actual money we've got to spend to bring in those kind of players, it's very good money. You can see here, transfer budget sits at £88,000. Our wage budget currently sits at a limitation of £11,500. We're only spending £7,500. I am looking at players, of course, you can kind of see here, looking at players whose contracts are expired who might be good transfers for us. I'm kind of holding off making any kind of rash transfers just yet until I get a better picture for the players who have been released and who are really going to add something to our team. But yeah, I am looking again, much like last year, just to bring in a lot of players who have been released, players who have not been given a second chance, and see what we can do. And yeah, there's quite a few players on our books, and we've got the money perhaps to bring in 1 or 2 really big players if we want to. Of course, speaking of the finances, they're in a very good position, £406,000 in the black right now. And of course, we did improve our facilities this year, which was good. In terms of if I want to improve them further, I may well do. I kind of like having a little bit of money sat in the bank, and obviously we've been pretty good with our money when it's come to spending it on players. The facilities took a big kind of chunk of our finances that we made last year. This year, I'm kind of happy just to sit on a little bit of our money a little bit longer, weigh up where we want to spend it. But of course, good to get, I guess, our foot on the ladder when it comes to actually having some facilities that we can, develop further as we do go up through the divisions. As much as kind of good youth facilities and youth recruitment are early on, I don't feel like they're as, crucial as just being able to sign players. Of course, our facilities, we spent almost £200,000, I believe, on them, maybe even more than that last year. In reality, that's kind of money could potentially be better spent actually signing players rather than improving youth facilities, for example, when in reality the youth players we produce and that we have right now probably aren't going to be at the club in a few years' time because they're just not going to be up to the standards that I expect them to be up to. But all in all, I am very, very happy with our squad. We have a lot of players ready and raring for kind of Vanarama National and North and South football. We are going to be going up into that Vanarama South division. If we just take a look at that division real quick, just to give you a feel for it, you can see here the playoffs are still going on. But if we look at the league table, it's been a fairly competitive competition all in all. Lots of very big teams here. It's going to be tricky for us, I feel like. But it'll be interesting to kind of see how things pan out. The overall standard in both these divisions is good. I kind of look at teams like Kettering, who you can see here won the Southern Premier Division. They actually play in the Vanarama National League North. But they won the league this year in the Vanarama North, having been promoted once already. So they're kind of the model we're looking at. We want to be as good as Kettering are right now, kind of going into next season. You can see here, Robinson, their best player. If we just compare him to Smith, it'll be an interesting comparison, this one, because of course Kane Smith is considered our key player. If we look at the comparison, you can see here, Anthony Robinson, definitely a better player than Smith. So I am going to need to look to improve, but I don't want to spend crazy money on just one or two players. I want to add in quality players for a reasonable price. And unlike this year, perhaps I don't want to sign players for the sake of it. I'm quite happy with our overall squad balance. I feel like we just need a few more players just to improve the overall standards. But anyway, guys, hopefully you enjoyed this kind of end-of-season look back, just to look through, I guess, at the squad, who performed well, how we got on in the league. I'd be interested to know if you'd like to see these kind of every season going on forward. I feel like they're a good way for me to kind of let you guys know what's going on, talk about my ideas for the club going forward, just highlight a few of the nitty-gritty stats that perhaps don't otherwise get covered in these episodes. So yeah, that's all from me. If you've got any comments with regards to this, any extra info you'd like to see me cover in these reviews, let me know them down in the comments. And other than that, thank you so much for watching as always, guys. It is me, Jack, and I will talk to you guys in a bit. I'm out.